Frank has been, I've run into you like in many meetings. I don't know how that is. We always go to the same meetings. Usually the Everglades, let me get this on. Usually at the Everglades Coalition and places like that, right? And I just know that we agree on most things. And I've noticed that over the time. But he's been a great contact in the Sierra Club, and the Sierra Club is one of the more active ones I've seen in the country here in Florida. So good for you guys, and thanks for all the support you've given for the environment. So you can say whatever you want to say.
I am going to. So my name is Frank JACKLONE, Florida Chapter Director of the Sierra Club. We have 240,000 members and supporters in the state of Florida. We've got 17 groups around the state, including one here in Southwest Florida. I want to recognize a couple of my colleagues who are in the back. Chris Costello, who directs our Wild Florida programs, which includes the Red Tide Campaign, Wildlife Protection Campaign, Everglades Restoration Campaign, and Michael McGrath, who is our new organizer in Southwest Florida, based in Fort Myers. He's working to protect the panther and wildlife habitat here and to fight red tide. I may speak a little bit longer than you want, but just cut me off, okay? And I just want to tell you that I'm taking a little bit of liberty because I just turned 65 in October. I'm getting into my Marjorie Stoneman Douglas years, and I'm angry, and I'm gonna tell it like it is. All right. So when I got started in Florida 23 years ago, I came to Florida to head Sierra Club's operations to build it. And the first thing that I encountered was Everglades. And Everglades was the most complex issue that I had ever faced in my life. I mean, I had worked on a lot of things, but Everglades was really complex because of all of the competing interests. The population in South Florida, and Southwest Florida, and Central Florida, 1/3 of the state really dependent on the Everglades and surrounding the Everglades, encroaching into the Everglades, big agriculture, being a dominant force in the Everglades, and then people having come up with all these plans to replumb the Everglades that failed, that diverted the water to the sea, that compartmentalized the Everglades, that led all of these unintended consequences that were killing the Everglades. So people realized they needed to do something about it. They came together on something called the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, SERP. Any of you ever hear of that? Okay, so there we've got some people who've studied this. All right. So I was involved in lobbying for SERP and getting it improved. Sierra Club almost opposed SERP, which might have been a kiss of death for SERP because we had a presence in Washington, and there were people who were wondering in D.C., why should Florida get all this money? You know, you're committing the first ever ecosystem restoration project in the country that Congress was fully committing to with a 50-50 partnership with the state. We're talking $10, $20 billion, right? Why should we commit all that money? And any excuse might have derailed it. So what we got was an agreement that the National Academy of Sciences should review the plan, and that there should be adaptive management of the plan as well. So that the original plan really looked like it was a water supply plan rather than Everglades restoration. Adaptive management gives you the ability to continue to push with the help of scientists to improve the plan and to take away the elements that really didn't work that well and weren't intended for ecological restoration. So we basically saw 4 things that were critical for Everglades restoration back then. First, you have to restore the spatial extent of the Everglades, right? So you're really not restoring the Everglades if you're not restoring the extent, at least to some degree. You need to clean up the water that enters the Everglades. Dirty water The dirty water problem now has become statewide, but then everybody was focused on the phosphorus going into the Everglades. You need to decompartmentalize the Everglades, allowing the water to flow freely again. And you need to rehydrate the Everglades with water that is now being sent to the Atlantic and Gulf Coast. And there's one thing that's common to all of that, those 4 points. What's common to it is that massive wetlands restoration in the Everglades, in the historical Everglades footprint, is the only way to accomplish all 4 of those goals. You have to restore the wetlands to do all of that. All right? If you make the plan about building artificial water supply storage, components, and that's what the plan becomes, you're not restoring the river grass. You're not restoring the spatial extent of the river, and you're not truly restoring the flow of water from Lake Okeechobee south to Florida Bay and Florida Keys. Now, this is simplified, right? Because you can't fully restore the Everglades, but you can restore a lot of it. So how much, and what's the right mixture? How do you produce the ecological benefits that are needed for wildlife and for plants in the Everglades to be restored? There are 2 factors that we had on our radar that really go beyond those 4 points that I mentioned that now have become pretty big. The first are the exotic invasive species that are taking over the Everglades. Pythons you hear about, of course, but there are all sorts of exotics going into the Everglades, both plant and animals, that threaten the Everglades. Luckily, scientists are on that, and there's unanimity that we need to find the approaches to take care of that. Nobody knows whether we can find the ultimate solution because it all depends on what people are releasing into the environment, right? The second one is climate change. So climate change, in the 23 years that I've been here, is overtaking all of the rest. And if we do not address the causes of climate change and scale that back, we're going to lose the Everglades anyway. We can restore the wetlands, we can do we can approach it, but if we do not also address climate change, and I don't mean building higher seawalls, I mean addressing the causes of it, the Everglades will be lost within 100 years, maybe sooner. All right, so with that, we still need to fix the Everglades, and wetlands actually can be part of the solution. So what are some of the corollary benefits, all right, besides achieving those 4 goals? 1, you reduce the nutrients that fuel harmful algae growth. That's the subject of this meeting. Second, you create a large carbon sink, an important contribution to reforestation and ultimately toward climate change mitigation. Also, we avoid the construction of massive artificial water storage projects that not only carry a false promise of Everglades restoration, but they also create a risk of major ecological damage and human harm. Examples: aquifer storage and recovery wells. The original plan envisioned several hundred aquifer storage and recovery wells that the U.S. Geological Society said, if you put that much water into the aquifer, you are going to put so much pressure down there that it will crack the limestone rock that encompasses the aquifer. And it's a threat to the very foundation under the state of Florida. The National Academy of Sciences confirmed that, and as a result, the ASR plan was scaled back. Second example, deep well injection. Deep well injection takes water that ought to be going to the natural system, injects it below the boulder zone, and you don't have access to that water anymore. This is a relatively new concept that I think has been shelved right now, but you can bet it's still somewhere floating out there in the books. And the third, the one that is most controversial here, that some of my panelists might disagree with me on, is the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir. But I know Dr. Mitch deals pretty closely on this. DEA Reservoir is taking billions of dollars aside to construct a 23-foot high reservoir on a narrow footprint instead of adding more wetlands on top of the existing SDAs that we have. And the cost of it, in our view, is higher than if you just went out and bought the wetlands and restored them. And the ecological benefits are much less. You're really not restoring the river grass. You're not, how are you going to clean the water sufficiently in order to release it further south when it's sitting in that reservoir? If you don't add the additional stormwater treatment areas, you have a problem. And so we were very disappointed when a plan for a 6-foot high reservoir that would cover a large area, acquire a lot of land in the sugar areas, was converted to a 23-foot high reservoir on a smaller parcel of existing land owned by the state. It was a deal with the sugar industry. We think it's a bad deal, and we're going to continue to say that. And then the final benefit of massive wetlands restoration are economic benefits. Wetlands restoration, less expensive, saving taxpayers money. Economic catastrophe is avoided if we deploy a wetlands creation strategy to combat red tide and climate change. You won't do it by itself, but it's a key element in addressing those two issues. Wetlands creations can be a smart business move, and Dr. Mitch has done a brilliant job in addressing that issue, and you'll learn more about that over the next couple of days. And we would also point out that if we were to buy that sugar land and you downsize sugar, not eliminate it, but downsize it, and downsize sugar's economic growth, the people in the Glades community south of Lake Okeechobee and all those fishing communities, those farming communities, would not be quite so much under the yoke of big sugar and would be able to diversify economically and rebuild. So that's another economic benefit of a different plan. Now, in related news today, Florida formally applied to transfer 404 wetlands destruction permits from the federal government to the state. Chris?
I just hissed. Sorry,
Yes.
it just
Okay,
came
I
out.
couldn't shoot your head no. Okay. So this is danger because, you know why it's a danger? Because those wetlands destruction permits are requested by developers. And developers have a tremendous amount of power in the state of Florida. You know, in my view, they have direct access to all decision makers, whether it be the governor, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the state legislature, and the compliant state judiciary. And if you doubt that developers have absolute control of the Florida government, take a look at some of these examples. They were able to achieve the elimination of the Department of Community Affairs when Rick Scott came in and became governor, which controlled growth management in the state. Replaced it with the Department of Economic Opportunity. The appointments to Florida Wildlife Commission tend to mostly be developers or development interests. Disregard of Amendment 1 that was passed by the voters in 2014 for the past 6 years. And then the lightning fast approval of massive toll roads last year by the legislature, something the DOT didn't even ask for or want, Department of Transportation, DOT. And then the legislature also virtually eliminated the right of citizens to sue on county development decisions. You know, when you look at it, and there are a lot more examples, developers control the state of Florida. And then when the economy surges, they want more sprawl. They want more development. And they're going to want to destroy those isolated wetlands when they're in the way. They're going to get permission from the state government to do it. That's the news today. You ought to know about it. You ought to join us in fighting back. So how much worse can things get? Pretty bad, actually. You know, we're talking about a combined existential threat to Florida that, if unchecked, will lead to mass extinction of our state's endemic endangered species and make the state unlivable for people. Wetlands restoration is a key component of what Florida must do to divert catastrophe. E.O. Wilson, how many of you know E.O. Wilson? Okay, famous scientist based at Harvard, really just tremendous leader in the scientific community. E.O. Wilson called upon humanity to set aside 50% of the land for nature recently. And as a step toward achieving that goal, the Sierra Club has launched a 30 by 30 campaign with the objective of protecting 30% of all land in the U.S. by 2030. That's pretty ambitious considering I think we're at 19% now. I think we're close to about 19%, so we've got to get to 30 in 10 years. That's going to be a big mission. It will take a lot of work to get there, but in Florida, we need to do our share, and we need to prioritize wetlands. It's not just the forests in the west that need to be preserved, it's the wetlands in the south as well, including Florida. So there is hope if we follow the science and take collective action to get our city council members, our county commissioners, our legislators, our governors, our president, and the courts to adopt the solutions offered by E.O. Wilson, Dr. Mitch, the staff of the Everglades Wetlands Research Center, and the esteemed scientists who are going to be presenting at this workshop. Thank you.